I love figuring out how to encourage students in home practice. And those of you who've been here before on my channel may also know that I love brainstorming what to do if students haven't practiced. But today is all about encouraging home practices and getting to know what kind of obstacles students may encounter and how we can help solve that to create success in music making at home. So today I'll be presenting key practice tips from a book called The Practice Revolution by Phillip Johnstone. While this is just one of many fantastic resources available, it does offer valuable insights for teachers, students, and parents alike. And I actually hosted this years ago as a parent workshop at our music school, so I thought I would bring that back and share it with you today. So as teachers, we share a unique challenge. No matter how enthusiastic or skilled we are in lessons, student progress ultimately depends on what happens in those 6 days between lessons. Johnson in his book reminds us that a 30-minute lesson is only 0.3% of a student's week, leaving 99.7% of the time where a student is responsible for their own progress. So in this session, we will identify common practice flaws and their solutions. We'll discuss obstacles that prevent students from practicing effectively, and we'll explore the role of parents and caregivers in supporting productive piano practice at home. So I love how Phillip Johnstone talks about some unique names when it comes to talking about practice, so you'll get a chuckle. So the first one is called chopping wood with a spoon. So you can kind of visualize, oh, what does that all mean? So in this scenario, students may be working hard but using the wrong technique or tool, which is going to produce discouraging results. For example, students may use a metronome to gradually increase the speed of a song, and that can be a great tool, but using a metronome on a new piece when they're struggling with the basics may produce a guessing game habit and the opportunity to practice incorrect notes just to stick with the beat. Another time that might happen is trying to play a piece at the speed they've heard it played and then get into discouragement when it just can't happen without producing tension at the instrument. Number 2 is our shiny object polishers. And I was definitely guilty of this one. It's tough because who here can vouch for the sweet satisfaction of playing something correctly? And this is also reinforced easily as students might receive praise for practices that sound great, when they may have large gaps of their repertoire that need more work, but they prefer to keep everyone in the house happy by practicing the easy listening sections. Things to remember for this style of practicer is that it's okay to sound bad while you're practicing. And if your practicing is sounding great all the time, you might be practicing the wrong bits. So I'd love to hear in the comments if some of these resonate with you and what ideas you have. Feel free to join in the comment section. The next one is sheep counters. So you've heard of that idea when someone's trying to fall asleep and they're just thinking of the sheep jumping in repeat. So in a scenario with a practicer, this is playing the same thing over and over again, hoping it will magically improve. Some things may improve, but realistically, if it isn't working, it's important to assess what practice tools would be better suited to see improvement instead of blindly practicing that section again incorrectly. In fact, repeating things incorrectly and actually practicing actually is worse than not practicing sometimes because you're practicing it wrong. Anyways, the next one is speed demons, and we all have students that we work with, or it could be yourself or a child that you work with. So when notes are flying by at Mach 3, it can be easy to pretend that there's no errors. It can also be a crutch of an ear-based student who wants to hear it as it was demonstrated, and that can be tricky to slow it down. So working at those various speeds, sometimes I get my students to play something like sloth speed. Then we might try it tortoise speed, and I get them to name the speed that they're going to demonstrate the piece in. The next one up is gluttons. So that is trying to do too much at once. And sometimes this is also a time management issue, because a student might finally get to the keys and think, oh my goodness, I have so much to do. So they can get feeling discouraged when nothing comes together and everything they're working on just feels like a rough sketch of what it could be. So supporting students might look like setting parameters for practice and assigning small sections and goals for that section before moving on. Sometimes I even get out sticky notes and cover some sections so they only focus on a small amount. Drifters. Often these are willing practicers, and they set out with no goals except actually practicing, which again is fabulous, but they can find that no real progress is made as they float in and out of different pieces, different exercises, and make no real progress. Instead of writing down the actual practice time or what they did, it might be valuable for this type of practicer to write down what they hope to accomplish in advance. Number 7, skimmers. These practicers may practice a section until they have their first taste of success, and then quickly move on. This produces sketchy results, as they've usually practiced a section more times incorrectly than correctly. These practicers may also proclaim, it sounded better at home. Now, is that the average of all the times they played it at home, or the occasional brilliance of that 10 out of 10 performance? The next one is, I forgot to put these up. So we had the drifters, the next one, the skimmers, and then the clock watchers. So the main goal of the clock watcher is to pass the required time on the clock in order to stay out of trouble. It is important to discuss goals and end results with this kind of practicer, as quality can be minimal and students frustrated and discouraged, as they may even feel like there's not enough material to practice, say, 30 minutes on. And I know that is sometimes, here, let's do 10 minutes of practice, or let's do 30 minutes. And then students say, well, I only have 2 pieces. How am I possibly going to do that? And if they're just playing through repertoire, that could be tricky at those elementary levels. So the next one is autopilots. And autopilots might have a mindless practice on a set schedule. And again, these things can be wonderful, but it's great to know the student style so we know how to better support them. So mindless practicers may set things up on a schedule, like their technique, their sight reading, their ear resources, and then their repertoire. These students tend to be very routine, which can be wonderful, but they may play with more cookie-cutter dynamics and minimal thought. A different use of the timer is to use it in small increments, i.e. a 3-minute timer could go off as a focus to give students the opportunity to set tangible goals for the section they are working on and a reason for navigating that section. So again, great to have students at the keys, and now it's time to just support them in fresh ways to keep motivation high. The next is those pattern practicers. These students may be working very hard but have little to show for it and can be highly focused and diligent. A great way to work with this type of student is to brainstorm a list of 10 to 15 ways of practicing a section for a specific piece. Half tempo, full tempo, sections in random order, play to reflect different moods or emotions each time through, etc. Number 11, always from the top. So this reinforces the first part of the piece and actually does little to correct the mistakes that cause the return to the top in the first place. So for this practicer, you could try picking a few practice zones for each piece and working through those parameters to make sure the beginning doesn't become the shiny part of your piece. I'd love to hear how you would work with each of these learners as well, so we can brainstorm together. Number 12 is the bad bricklayers. And these students can also be great students who have worked hard on sections and followed those directions with care, but now the challenge may be in linking those bricked sections together into one unified piece. 13, ignoring the map. These students may again be hard workers, but they might dive in with little regard to the music or the instructions or goals from the previous lesson. They feel their way through the piece, but may find that little progress has been made and the same mistakes are there when they return to their next lesson. They are also generally good memory students and prefer to memorize rather than check the score. Again, what a gift to have a great memory, and most of us love that, so it's just working to student strengths in these situations. The next might be the red light runners. These students often play through a piece without noticing any trouble areas. When asked how their week of practicing went or how their piece is coming, it may be an enthusiastic great when there could be startling inconsistencies in their piece. For this student, it may be helpful for them to have a few specific goals per piece and divide them up. For instance, their first 5 minutes of focus could be finger planning, and their goal is to find those mistakes they're making. Then we could work on rhythm, dynamics, phrasing. These can be helpful for all students to jot down different areas and elements of practice. And again, practice doesn't just come naturally for most of us, so it's a really important part of teaching and parenting to help encourage great practice strategies. So now let's look at some ways to help these practicers further. And we'll talk about why students don't practice and gain some empathy and some strategies for them. So the next part is we're going to take a little look at time management, and that's a big one for most of us. So time management, often hardworking students with a lot of skill in different areas, but not the ability to coordinate all the deadlines, and so they may be scattered and unable to multitask. So ways to help would be to coordinate deadlines and include other commitments as well. And so again, brainstorming on behalf of our students. We also have on this channel some ideas for atomic practice habits and that 1% gains that James Clear talks about in his books. And so I'll link some of those resources at the end of this video as well. Number 2, reading problems can be a big barrier for music learners in independent practice. So the apparent success for a student who struggles with music reading is diminished because it's hard for them to work independently. So given equal time with the same piece, a struggling reader will not glean the same results. Often a diligent student, they can just get swamped with the demands of reading and give up in discouragement. Along with the help with reading, the student can be revived by helping them set aside time for non-reading as part of their practice time. Scales, dynamic interest, creative interpretation can be life-giving in the midst of slogging through notes. And I'll add that in recent years, I've also added more improvising and composing, and I have lots of resources on how to add that into practice as well. Lack of parental support. Now, I get this one because I'm a busy parent, and even my own learners, it can be hard to know how best to help. So especially with young students, though, support is needed when it comes to the task of practicing. And much like getting them to clean a messy bedroom, they might need some tips on where to start, and often they also require our presence. Also, reading through their notebook with them at the beginning of the week is a great place to start when setting goals. Even if you don't know music, parents or caregivers may be able to ask questions like, "Oh, I see you are learning about quarter notes," scanning the teacher notes. "Can you find them in your piece? How many counts do they get?" Students love to share what they know, and being a student yourself can be helpful, whether you're the teacher at lessons or a parent at home. Number 4, parental interference. So here we had the lack of the capacity to help at home, but sometimes we get a little over enthusiastic as parents. And there are times when, often by no fault of the parent, a student is resisting help with a practice. There are often some warning signs, and often musical parents can suffer the most with being unwelcome as students resist the constant reminders of practice gone awry. Coaching can take on many different forms, and it's okay to back away at times and leave the student to chat through expectations on their own with the instructor. A week that flies by. This is a week with wings, and I think we all know how fast a week can go. And without conscious time spent planning for practices, that can easily happen. And this can show up with students resisting a lesson, often because they know they are unprepared and feel bad that they might have to struggle through unprepared pieces. Sometimes fessing up, and sometimes just trying to fake it and pretend they'd actually worked on something in the previous week. Now, I have a whole video on strategies for what if students have not practiced at all, and I'll link that at the end of this video as well, because there are ways to make lessons enjoyable no matter what, but it will take some brainstorming. An overwhelming workload is next on our list, and if students feel like the task in front of them is impossible to achieve, they may show resistance to practicing. Why would you want to waste precious free time if your efforts are to no avail? Now, to be clear, it might just be the perception of an impossible workload, but whatever the case, they may feel overwhelmed and uninspired. Be careful to focus on the smaller parts instead of the large picture of what they're wanting to do. Music practice can often feel like putting a puzzle together, and it needs to happen piece by piece for success to be achieved. You can help as a parent and a teacher by breaking pieces down into achievable pieces, much like starting with the edges of a puzzle. So you might say, well, let's sit down at the kitchen table and take a look at your new piece. What section looks the hardest? Name notes, clap rhythms, define terms. Are there any sections that repeat? And I love having students look through their repertoire and think, are there anything that looks the same? Because it can be as good as Christmas morning when they find out that once they learn that one measure or section, they now get to repeat it 5 times throughout the piece. The next struggle may be unclear goals, so they don't even know what they're hoping to achieve. And if the only reason students practice is because they are supposed to, practicing will end sooner or later. What are their goals? Most of us don't like to do something tricky unless there's a motivating reason, like, I don't like doing the dishes, but I love the look of the clear, uncluttered countertop. What are they hoping to do with their music, or is their music helping them in another area of learning? What are the benefits in learning this piece or song? And we can also chat about goals. Maybe they have the goal to record a favorite piece or to play it for grandma for a recital. So you can chat about goals together, and that can often be a big boost in learning. Next up is believing that practice doesn't work. Sadly, this is a really tough obstacle to overcome, because if students are not taught sensible practice strategies and given opportunities to see progress, then ultimately they'll lose faith in progress and practice despite optimistic beginnings. Teachers and parents have a unique role in coaching students in practicing effectively, not just nagging about minutes, but rather teaching students to focus and practice sensibly with the goal on those rewarding outcomes. A student who sees progress is more likely to enjoy the process of learning. Teaching effective practicing is a skill that will give students a definite edge in many challenges they will face in life and learning through the years. And you're never too old to implement these ideas in your own practicing as well. It may just inspire you to pick up something new, implement a new strategy for learning, and embrace learning yourself once again. So the role of parents: be interested. genuine interest in lessons, asking your child what is their favorite song to play, what's their hardest section of the piece, do you have a goal for the week? Encourage, not just when things sound amazing, but what about if you hear them slow down and play it thoughtfully, or just work on a small section, or take time to read their notebook instructions. That will help them avoid just being a shiny object polisher. You can also reflect together on what they're trying to achieve, or if they have some special goals. Steer. Sometimes some gentle help with project management can be helpful, i.e., that piece is sounding terrific. Is there a section you're struggling with that I can help you with, or that you want me to listen to? Enthuse. Not just praise for when they are succeeding, but enthusiasm for where they are headed. Check progress early. Now, this is a huge one for me, but checking on progress, not just the night before lessons when you're wondering if they've practiced, but early on in the week to check if they need any support, if they need any materials downloaded or printed, or if you can help read through the lesson notes together. And then there are times that no help is needed at all. Some students need to find their way to be independent and would resist chocolate ice cream if it was their parents' suggestion. So knowing when to avoid interfering is another huge aspect. So I have loved chatting about practice with you from my archives of parent workshops. And if you have another topic you'd love me to focus on, I'm here for you. I also have a brand new Thrive in 3 newsletter, and I'll link how you can subscribe to that for free for teachers who love more creativity, student management tips, and resource suggestions. Teachers, you're welcome to share this with your student parents, and parents, talk to your child's teacher about how you can support their practice at home, and let's work together to see students succeed. Now, what happens if your child or student has a week with zero, zip, not a moment of practice? Are lessons still valuable? You bet they are. So check out this video next to find out how you can skip the guilt and optimize your music making in fresh ways. Thank you for joining us. This was some reflections on Phillip Johnstone's Practice Revolution book. I also have videos highlighting Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I also love the book How to Practice Music by Andrew Eales, and I'll link that in the video description as well. Thanks for listening in. See you next time.